Okay. Hey, Avi. All right.
Hello,
So, hey, Barbara. I hope you're feeling better.
I am, and thank you and Aaron for both the Refuah Shemea
You're
prayers.
welcome.
I appreciate it.
Welcome. All right, guys. We're going to hey, Ariel. We're holding the Gemara now on page 96a. In the middle of the page, it starts V'yachlek Alehem Laila. Okay. So we were talking about before the different what happened to Sancheir. At the end, he was killed. Sancheir was killed by his two sons when they heard that he was planning to sacrifice them when he found the beam from the Ark of Noah. And he felt that either, according to Rashi, he remembered the miracle that God did for Noah, that he saved him, so he wanted God to save him, and he figured the way to do it was by sacrificing his sons to God, or he worshipped the beam. Either way, his two sons killed him. So that was the end of Sancheir, who tried to destroy Jerusalem, who came on King Hezekiah, and God brought the miracle the night of Pesach and destroyed his entire army, which was 2.6 million people. Okay. So the Gemara is going to continue on the idea of angel power, so to say. So we know when was the other time we have angel power, and we said that the armies of Sancheiriv were similar to the armies that Avram Avinu, our father Avram, fought when he fought with the 4 and 5 kings. So it says like this: Vayecholek alehem laila hu vavada vayakim. Seemingly, the translation of the verses, he divided himself up against by the night. It means at night he kind of Avram divided his camp, and he fought the 4 kings. So Amr Rabbi Yochanan says, I say malach shenizdamin laila Avram laila shmoi. That doesn't mean that he divided the camps at the night, but the night, the name of the angel that helped Avram, his name is Laila Shmoi. His name is Laila. So the angel that came to Avram to help him fight the 4 kings, his name is Laila. Shenemar, how does he supports his claim with a verse? It says, "V'halayla oimar hayra gover." So he says the night says, and Laila said, "A man child is brought forth," talking about from Job. So we see Laila says something; it's an angel. Okay, so and the Mefarshim explain, the Mashal explains that the wording, the proof for this idea that it wasn't just that he divided up his camp by night, is the wording Vayechalek Aleihim Laila is not the proper grammar for saying that at night he divided his camp. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha is another opinion. Sha'asi imay ma'isa Laila, that what happened was that at night there was a night kind of experience, which says Shneimar min Shemaim nilchamu hakoychavim mim siloisam nilchamu im Sisra. It's talking about, one second, Aaron. It's talking about the battle of Sisra, when Sisra went and battled. We're going to see there's a lot of comparison between the battle that Sisra had with Barak and Devorah, right? We learned about that in Shoftim and Judges. So it says min Shemaim nilchamu hakoychavim, that the stars came to fight against Sisra, so too by night the stars came to fight against the 4 kings. So Reish Lakish, who is a colleague of Rabbi Yochanan, says that he just plays on the words that Tava nafacha midvar nafacha. So Rabbi Reish Lakish says that the smite is preferable to the son of the smite. What's the difference? Rabbi Yitzchak's name is Rabbi Yitzchak nafacha. Rabbi Yochanan's father, we'll see in a second, Rashi explains, is Rabbi Yochanan bar nafcha. So he's saying that he likes better the explanation of Rabbi Yitzchak, which says that the stars helped Avram, than the explanation of Rabbi Yochanan, who's the son of Nafcha, which said that the angel is Laila. Yes, Aaron.
I'm not good at Hebrew grammar. So what's the proper grammar and explain the grammar part? And
I'm not going to get, and I don't want to get the detail of the grammar because it's a side point, but the Marsha says the wording is Vayechalik Aleihim Laila Hu Vavadav. And it's so that the night divided him and his servants. The proper grammar should have been that he and his angels divided at night. Better is the wording is he at night divided his angels. It should have said him and his servants divided at night. That would be the proper grammar.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So I'm going to do the Rashis. Rashi says, I did the Malachim. So Rashi says, why are we talking about Avram over here? So Rashi says, since we were talking about the angels that came to destroy the camp of Sisera, so because we talk about that night, meaning the great night of Pesach, when God came and struck let's say through Gabriel, struck the camp of Sanhedrin. We're talking about also at night when Avram was saved by the angel Lila or by the stars. Malach, so Rashi says, Malach is Damal Avram Lila Shemai V'Husayeyu. The angel that came to help Avram, his name is Lila, and he's the one who came to support Avram in his battle. He says, Maisa Laila. What does it mean, Maisa Laila? That the idea of what does it mean that the acts of the night, that the stars came to fight for Avram like they did in the days of Barak. Barak again is the Sisera, again, quick story, everyone knows Sisera came, he was a king around Eretz Yisrael at the time of the judges. He came, Barak was from the tribe of Naphtali with Devorah, and at the end, the woman came and killed Sisera. He came into her tent, and her name, I forget her name, but some I'm sure remembers her name, that she was
Judith.
Judith? Yes, okay. Judith, and she came and she killed Sisera. Okay, thank you, Barbara. So he says like this. Hey Shuki, we're on page 66a. So we're in the middle of the Rashi. Rashi says Tavla Mila de Rav Nafcha midvar Nafcha. So what does he mean that he likes the words of Nafcha than the son of Nafcha? So here's an interesting Gemara. The Rashi says Rabbi Yochanan de Mikri bar Nafcha. Rabbi Yochanan is called the son of Nafcha. But Kuli Hashas throughout the Shas. Man Ayil bar Nafcha. What is bar Nafcha? Nira lemayrai. So Rashi says my teachers feel the Aviv shel Rabbi Yochanan have Nafcha. The reason he was called the son of Nafcha because his father was Nafcha, which would make the most sense. We know, I just want to bring this Rashi down, we know the Gemara teaches us that he's called Bar Nafcha because of his beauty. Rabbi Yochanan was known as one of the beautiful people of all time. There's a short list of beautiful men in Torah. It's Adam, Yaakov, and Rabbi Yochanan. So it says, so Rabbi Yochanan was a very good-looking man. That's how he was actually, with his good looks, is how he was Makar of Reish Lakish, who was a thief. Also, Rabbi Yochanan, the Gemara tells us, he would stand outside the mikveh by the woman. So when they would look at Rabbi Yochanan, they would want to have beautiful sons. Okay, that's just a side note. So Rashi says he's called Bar Nafcha as a sign of his beauty. So what happened? The continuation of the story of Avram. So what does Avram do? He chases the camp of the four kings. So it says that he. Also, the Marsha says this in a side point that according to Rabbi Yochanan, that it's the angel Lila, that generally that angel is brought down is in Nida is the angel that takes care of children. We know that there's children that need a special angel that watches over the children. His name is Lila, right? The night angel that watches over the children. So because he has a job already, so therefore Reish Lakish says, he said, why does Reish Lakish like the answer of Rabbi Yitzchak over Rabbi Yochanan? Because according to Rabbi Yitzchak, it's just the stars that helped him. It's not the angels. Whereas if according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's the angels are not allowed to have two jobs. So if his job is to be watching children at night, he has no business, mixing into Avram's battle, so to say. So that's why the Marsha says that Rabbi Reish Lakish would prefer to go with Rabbi Yitzchak's translation of Lila, meaning the night stars. Okay, but what happened? So Vayirdaf Adon, he chases them till Dan. Dan is I think he means when they're talking about Dan in this part, we're talking about what's known as the Dan in Eretz Yisrael, which is the Tel Aviv area. That's called Dan. So Avram chased them all the way till Dan. That's the area I think that's the area. So till today we keep the biblical names and areas of Eretz Yisrael, like Binyamin is where Binyamin is. Till today, Yehuda v'Shomron. So I think Dan is kind of northwest. Is Rabbi Yochanan? Rabbi Yochanan says, "Kivan Shabai Sitzadik Adan." Avram chases them all the way to Dan. Tashash Koichai. Okay, just geographically, Sodom is southeast. So he chases them all the way to northwest. So Kivan Shabai Sitzadik Adan. When he reaches the area of Dan, Tashash Kaichai, he weakens. Why does Avram weaken? So it's not just because he got tired. He saw that eventually his descendants, meaning with King Yeravam, right? Yeravam set up the two golden idols in Dan, one in Dan. So when he saw that his descendants are going to serve idols in Dan, which was the beginning of the division of the two kingdoms, and the kingdom of Israel went off the way of Torah. He put one of the statues talking about Yeravim ben Avat in Beis Kel, and the second one he put in Dan. Beis Kel obviously is not the Beis Kel of last week's parsha, because Beis Kel we learned in the Gemara a week ago that Beis Kel is Yerushalayim. So he didn't put up a statue in Yerushalayim, but he put it up in the Beis Kel that was, I guess, a different place at the time. According to the Rashi and the Chumash, it's not a problem because Beis Kel anyways is in the north. But according to the Gemara we just learned last week, we said Beis Kel is Jerusalem, so it's obviously a different Beis Kel, I'm assuming. And here we find, we're going back to Sisro. So Avram gets weak when he reaches Dan, because he feels the weakness of his descendants serving idols. On the contrary, Sisroi gains strength when he comes to Dan. Why does he gain strength? To fight the Jewish people in Dan, because that's where there's the sin of the Jewish people gives strength to our enemies. So Sisroi gains strength when he goes to Dan. When did he start hearing the power of the snorting of his horses? Was when he reached Dan. That's when they really picked up speed in their pursuit of the Jewish people, of course, until Barbara said, till he was killed eventually by Yudis. Omer Rav Zera. Okay, this finishes this little section of Avram Avinu. Now we're going to go back to the the Gemara about a little bit about Sancheriv, and mainly we're going to go into Nebuchadnezzar. Amar Rab Zera. Rab Zera says like this. Again, we're still on page 96a. Even though we have a message, we'll see what the even though means. That's not so simple. But even though we have a message from, or although we have a message from Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Beseira, from Netzivim, he's haru bizak, and he gave us a warning. What was the warning? The Gemara, one second, hold on. I'm looking out of the... It looks like there's different girsas who sent. I was wondering about that. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira lived in the time of the second temple. Rabbi Zera lived in the destruction, after the destruction. He lived in the time of Rabbi Yochanan. So the Gemara on the side that I have on the computer says that Rabbi Shua ben Levi sent it, which lived more in the time. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira lived much earlier. But either way, the Gemara over here seems to have Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira as well. So that's the version Rabbi Steinsaltz put in. That even though Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira sent out that what did he send out? 3 ideas. One is Hizaru b'zaken sheshakach talmudai machmas einsei. This is a nice thing he says. He says you have elderly people, right? This is an important point. You have an elderly people that some people know them in their elderly age, and they seem to have, their mind isn't as sharp as it once was, and they're forgetful. So he says, don't mistreat an elderly person who forgot his studies because of Einstein. It wasn't his fault. His age caused it. So don't mistreat an Talmud Chacham that once was more sharp and now he's more forgetful. That's number one. Second thing he said, we could talk about a long time why would he send such a warning, but that's number one. Number two is Vizaro bivridin Rabbi Yehuda. He says even though the law isn't like Rabbi Yehuda, meaning to say that when we cut. Well, the difference between how one treats a bird, kosher bird like a chicken versus an animal, when you slaughter an animal, then you really cut it up to pieces and you salt it, so you really take all the blood out. Blood is something that's prohibited for Jews to eat. But when it comes to animals, we only read them. People are not really. They kind of could cook a whole bird. They could slaughter it and just cook it whole. Just take out the insides and cook it whole. Because of that, we may not drain the blood. So he says, even though the halach is we don't have to drain the blood, but still better be careful with the vridim, with the arteries, like Rabbi Yehuda, to make sure you drain properly the blood of the bird before you cook it. And that's number two. And the third thing he said, Hizaru b'bnei amei haaretz shemehem teitzei Torah ki ha milsa ma'idin lehu. So he says that also the third thing is that Rabbi Yehuda Meser said, be careful with the sons of ignoramuses, because sometimes they could end up having children that know Torah. And he says, and why even though we inform them of a message like this matter, meaning to say, Rabbi Zera says, even though it says to be careful with the Ami Aretz, we'll see different versions. Nevertheless, the children of the Ami Aretz have to also know where they come from. And we're going to see in a second also where it's referring to not just Ami Aretz, people in Rameses, but also it's referring to great wicked people of our history, Sancheriv, Haman. These are people that ended up were tyrants to the Jewish people, ended up having descendants that were Jewish. Even we're going to learn later that the great general that destroyed the first temple himself converted eventually. But so therefore to tell them that, either don't, kind of know where you come from. It's a difficult Gemara to understand what Reb Zeir is trying to say. But let's see the Rashi. Rashi says, Hizar b'zaken. What does it mean to be careful with an elderly person? That alpha pisha shachach talmudai hoyel v'machmas einzehu. It's brought down in Preke Chelek. A person should not. Preke Chelek uses a very strong term. A person who forgets their learning is mischayev benafshe, deserves to be killed. So Reb Yehuda ben Meseira said, don't be so hard on people who are forgetful, because sometimes the forgetfulness is not their fault. It's an onus. When you come old, you become a little more forgetful. And the second thing is Hizar b'vridim Rabbi Yehuda dam shchitas chula, and he says in the laws of slaughtering, you have to cut all the arteries of the bird, even though halachically you only have to cut one of the windpipe and the of the neck. When you're going because you're going to end up roasting it as a single bird, you don't properly salt it like we salt a domestic animal like a cow or a sheep, and therefore in order to get rid of the blood, even though the halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda, he's saying you should be still you should be careful and cautious of that. Now, what does it mean to be careful of the sons of Ami Oretz, of the ignoramuses, Shanasu Talmid Chacham? Eventually, their children could become studious people, Talmid Chacham. Lasam Kavich Mem Teitze Torah, the Israel. So why? He says, because be careful of who sometimes you put down a simple person, you never know who their children are going to be. Again, there's no excuse to put down anyone, but we're just saying this idea. Here we're not just talking about ignoramuses, we're talking about people that ended up were tyrants of the Jewish people, who ended up becoming the descendants of Sancheriv, Shmai Vavtalion. Shmai Vavtalion weren't just great Talmid Chacham, they literally were the leaders of the Jewish people in the times of the first, second temple. So the descendants of Sancheriv, who wanted to destroy the Jewish people, his descendants ended up eventually converting at some point. And Shmai Vavtalion, which were the teachers of Hillel, so their tradition of Torah goes through Shmai Vavtalion. They are descendants of Sancheriv. In this famous Gemara that says the grandchildren of Haman, the great tyrant of the story of Purim, Lamdu Torah b'Bnei Brak. They taught Torah in the city of Bnei Brak, which was a big city of yeshiva. We know that from the Haggadah by Rabbi Akiva. The Kaman, as we're going to learn. So even though Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira says you should be careful how you treat ignoramuses, what's Reb Zeir add to that? What does that mean? That we let them know about this, just like we're going to learn in a few minutes. Here he wants to say, the Rashi learns a very nice pshat. That this is a very important lesson when it comes to certain people who become a Talmud Chacham. You have sometimes that the Talmud Chacham says that looks down at his parents or her parents, says, I'm a studious Jew. My parents were, you don't give respect to your parents. He says, don't think it's by chance that you ended up becoming a studious person. There could be something your father did that you don't even know about, that the merit of that allowed for you to become a Talmud Chacham. So look back at your forefathers to know that there was a schus from them that you became something special. That's what he says. We're going to learn that. Why was Nebuchadnezzar king for 4 years, 4 generations? For the 4 steps he took for God, which we're going to learn about in a second. So do we tell to the children of the ignoramuses. Why do you think you became a Talmud Chacham? Not because you tried hard. Yes, we know you worked very hard in the yeshiva. But don't think that your parents didn't give you over any merits, any schusim. Your parents had certain merits, and because of that, you merited to go to yeshiva, and you merited to go, your parents paid the bills. Who do you think paid your school education? Other people learned that Reb Zeir is coming to say, Adl Ilka, he's talking about before. And it says, Avnei Sancheriv, Afgad the Shalch, Rabbi Yehuda, Hizaru b'bnei Amei Aretz Lechabdan. He says, he's talking about the children of Sancheriv, that even though Rabbi Yehuda said that we have to be careful of respecting the children of the ignoramuses, sometimes Torah comes out of them, just like Sancheriv's children became converts, like Shmai Vavtalion. So we tell the ignoramuses, the children, that don't worry about it. We say sometimes the opposite. Don't worry about your father's misdeeds. It's the Torah that you've studied. You don't think your father was such a great person. Your father was Sancheriv. So this opposite message that we tell according to the second opinion of Rashi. But the fact that you study Torah, therefore you're worthy of this covet. Okay, let's continue. Rashi has, again, Rabbi Steinsaltz goes into the different questions about these 3 points of Rabbi Yehuda and Beseira. He also goes into at length, it's not so simple, but we'll just leave on what we learned in Rashi. Let's go further. All right, the pasuk says like this. We're continuing in the Gemara on 96a. Sadik ata Hashem ki or v'lecha. It says, righteous would you be the Lord, were I to contend with you. This is what Reb Zeir says you're supposed to tell the children. Ach mishpatim adaber isach, yet will I reason with you. Ma'adu derech Hashem tzlecha. Why does the path of the wicked prosper? Shekol boigdei beged. Why are all the deal treacherously secure? You have planted them. They have also taken root. They grow and they also bring forth fruit. So this is the famous question. Why do sometimes we see wicked people are successful? And this is we're going to apply to Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar ended up becoming a world dominating leader for 4 generations. What do we answer? What did we answer to Yirmiyahu? Yirmiyahu asks a question. Why do we see that the tzaddikim sometimes suffer, but the people that are the wicked are successful? So the answer, Kesragli Ratzta, V'yal ucha ve'ech tachreha es asusim u'be'eretz shalom ata beteach ve'ech tase b'goyin hayarden. So what did he answer them? So the answer to them, the response to Yirmiyahu from heaven was, from God, if you have run with the pedestrians and they have wearied you, you can contend with the horses. Could you keep up with the horses? And though in the land of the peace you feel secure, how will you do in the wild country of the Jordan? Meaning to say, you feel secure when you're walking amongst, if you're tired amongst people, how are you supposed to keep up with the horses? We're going to see in a second what that means. So he says like this. The question is, why is the way of the wicked successful? Yirmiyahu asked the question to God, why was Nebuchadnezzar able to conquer Jerusalem? What did he merit? Like we said before, something else, right? We said before that he can't conquer Sancheriv, which came with a much larger army, couldn't conquer. Why was Nebuchadnezzar? What God answered. So here's the Gemara explains the answer that God gives to Yirmiyahu. Mashal Adam Echad Shomer. So for an example, give an example of the person that says like this. I could run 3 parsais, is a large amount of space, for ahead of the horses, right? I'm a strong person. In the swamplands, right? It's hard to walk in swamp. It's all mushy. He says, and ran before him 3 mil on the dry land and wearied. But nevertheless, I thought I could run with the horses ahead of the horses in the swamplands, and I'm walking on regular land, and I get tired. And he walked 1/3 of a meal, and he got tired. So God says to Yirmiyahu, if you can't walk with the walkers, how could you walk with the horses? If you weren't able to walk a short amount of distance, surely you're going to get really tired in a long amount of in a further distance. If you can't run in the dry land, but you want to run in the swamplands. So the person, we have all these aggressive people who say, I could run the marathon. You can't walk the shul. How could you run the marathon? So be careful. You don't be so ambitious. So what is he saying to? What was that answer to Yirmiyahu? So what did Yirmiyahu ask God? Yirmiyahu asked God, why is Nebuchadnezzar being successful? So God answers him that you're ambitious and you want to be able to run ahead of the horses. 1 second. Afata, so too Yirmiyahu. If for 4 steps, which we're going to see in a second what that means, that God paid to Nebuchadnezzar, he took 4 steps for God. That he protected God's honor. You're wondering, when I'm eventually going to pay the reward for Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, that they ran like horses. So basically, this is like the story of Rabbi Kiva, right? Rabbi Kiva and the rabbis go to the Rome. So the rabbis cry at the power of Rome who destroyed the temple. Rabbi Kiva laughs. Why? He said, if for the people who go against God's will, this is the reward. And imagine for us who did the reward. So similar to that is what God tells Yirmiyahu. If for Nebuchadnezzar only took 4 steps for God, this is his reward. Imagine what kind of reward is waiting for the descendants of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, who didn't just take 4 steps, but they ran like horses. So what's it that he says concerning the prophets? My heart within me is broken, all my bones shaken. I am like a drunken man, and like a man whom wine is overcome, due to the Lord and due to his sacred words, which is what Yirmiyahu says. Rashi says, "Nishbar libi bikirmi." Why is my heart broken? Klemer tamisi amatan scharna. I was wondering about the reward for the righteous. Okay. Like Rashi says before, the Rashi is just translated what we said before, Lachas Kamakama, that there's great reward for the forefathers, and the Nevi'im is referring to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Okay. So now the Gemara asks, if I'm going too fast and anyone has any questions, please slow me down. Okay. So we're holding now, basically, so Yirmiyahu asks God, why does Nebuchadnezzar have the power, so to say, to destroy Jerusalem? We're going to see what he did to honor to have power. And don't worry, seemingly from Rashi, it looks like the Rashi's understanding of the answer to Yirmiyahu was in a positive, that if this is what the reward is for Nebuchadnezzar, who only took 4 paces for God, imagine the reward that's waiting for the Jewish people in the time of at the time of the coming of the Mashiach, or the time of the day of reward. Okay. The Marsha evidently doesn't agree with Rashi's explanation. The Rashi's explanation seems to be the simple explanation, again, that the prophets have a better reward. So, because seemingly the verses again are a little shaky to understand. The verses is indicating that Yirmiyahu still remains in the question. Okay. Now, but what are the 4 paces what are these 4 paces that Nebuchadnezzar took? Again, I'm not a scholar of history. It seems like either people lived very long, the people in question lived very long, because in the time period we're talking about, close to 100 years of time that is going around over here, and Nebuchadnezzar seemingly lived very long, according to at least the Gemaras. He's well alive in the time of Chizkiyahu, and he's the destroyer of Jerusalem in the time of Tzidkiyahu. He dies not too much longer after that, but that seems to be that he had to be well into his hundreds, I'm assuming. So what I mean, he was a soldier already in the times of Chizkiyahu. So the Gemara says, what are these 4 paces that Nebuchadnezzar took for God? Okay, remember also from last week, just a side note, that according to one of the opinions, the only people that survived the battle of Sancheriv was Sancheriv's 2 sons. Everyone agrees to that. And 5, according to the opinion, there was only 5 survivors. So Sancheriv's 2 sons, Nebuchadnezzar, which ends up becoming the king at the time of the destruction of the first temple, and Nebuzaradan, which is his general, which we're going to learn about in a second. So he says, Hainu Arab Mai. What are these 4 steps? So the story goes like this. There was a king, his name was Merodach-Baladan. On Wikipedia, he shows up as the king of Babylon. So I think it seems like the kingdom of Babylon and Assyria kind of mixed, where there's like, in England, where you have the emperor of India and the king of England, you have 2 positions. So I think there was kings that had different kind of 2 positions, maybe through marriage, where they were both the kings of Assyria and the kings of Babylon, but not necessarily the kings of Babylon were the kings of Assyria. So it seems like Merodach-Baladan was the king of Babylon, whereas Sancheriv kind of connected at some point, where they were the kings of also. Sancheriv is younger than Merodach-Baladan, so he seems to be his grandson again. So people lived a long time. So the Chsiv Eisei Shalach Merodach-Baladan ben Baldan Merodach-Baladan ben Baladan Melech Bavel Sfarim. We're going to learn in a second why is his name Merodach-Baladan ben Baladan. But that was his name. He sent to the king Hezekiah, he sent a message. Mishum, what happened? What is the story? The story is like this. The Hezekiah, the king, gets sick. God tells him he's going to die. He ends up becoming better. And when he becomes better, the sign that he becomes better is the sun moves backwards. Merodach-Baladan has a very, very tight schedule in his life. So for some reason, he wakes up at a certain time, eats at a certain time, and when the sun kind of reversed itself for the honor of King Hezekiah, he wonders what's happening because he's living in Bavel. Bavel is what, 800 kilometers from Jerusalem. So he's living in Bavel and he sees that there's a change in the cosmos, and he wants to know what's going on. So he finds out that Hezekiah was made Kichalech Hezekiah, that Hezekiah got sick, and he got better. So Shadilai Svarim Mincha. So he sent him, just because he got sick, he sent him a message. The Gemara says, yes. Lidraish es hamoifes ashari baretz. The Amr Rabbi Yechon Oisa Yem Shemeis Boy Achaz Shtei Shas Hayu. This is what happens. Chizkiyahu was a righteous king. His father is Achaz, who's not a righteous king. God didn't want Achaz to have a proper burial. Some of the reasons is that Achaz should not get a eulogy, and the not having a eulogy would be a kapara. So it's brought down that a person who does not have a eulogy, it's an atonement for them because they don't get buried properly. So that the shame of not having a proper burial is part of the atonement. So God actually wanted to help Achaz, so he shortened the day. Okay, in Hebrew calendar, we know that the hours are 12 and 12. There's always 12 hours by day and 12 hours by night. The question is, how many minutes in the winter are the hours? The summer has longer hours, and the winter has shorter hours. But there's always 12 and 12. That's how the Jewish clock works. So there's 12 hours, and he shortens the day to 2 hours. So we're missing 10 hours in that day. So the day that Achaz dies, there's only 2 hours. So there's not enough time for proper burial. Like Rashi says, why was the day 2 hours for Achaz? So you shouldn't have time to have a proper burial and a proper eulogy. We know later Hezekiah, in order to do further atonement for his father, drags his father's body through the street as an atonement. The rabbis were not happy that he did that. So that's fast forward. Later in Hezekiah's life, he's king, and he becomes sick. When Hezekiah fell ill and recovered, so it says, God restored those 10 hours in the day that he got better. So 10 hours were missing. He restored those 10 hours the day that Hezekiah became sick and got better. The prophet says that I'll return the shadow, the dial which descended in the sundial of Achaz. That means what we lost with Achaz is going to come back on the day of the healing of Chizkiyahu. B'shemesh achronis eser milas, that the sun moved back 10 paces, 10-hour paces. Again, I'm not an astronomist, but 10-hour paces, basically the sun is going backwards. So you can imagine the king, who has a very tight schedule, notices the sun is going in the wrong direction. That kind of triggers his curiosity. So the sun goes back 10 paces. So this is happening in Jerusalem, or this is happening because of Chizkiyahu was in Jerusalem, but the sun is moving for everyone. So this Balach, what was his name again? Merodach-Baladan, the king of Babylonia, asks his servants, what's going on? Why is the sun going in the wrong direction? Amr Lahu, they knew everything, right? There was no internet. They didn't pick up the phone to Jerusalem and say, dialing into King Hezekiah wants to know what's going on. Why is the sun going the wrong direction? And there wasn't physically enough time to get from Jerusalem messages back and forth. Obviously, they had lines of communication that worked faster. They didn't need WhatsApp to communicate back in the day. So Amr Lahu, so his servants tell this Balach, the king, Chizkiyahu got sick, he got better, and because of that, God added 10 hours to the day of Achaz. Omer Ika Gavrki Hai. So the Balach said that such a person exists, that such a righteous person like King Hezekiah exists, and I'm not going to send him greeting. He rightly said this is a great tzaddik. I want to engage such a tzaddik. So he writes to Tzidkiyahu. This is all explaining why Nebuchadnezzar got 4 generations of kingship. Because of this story, we're going to see where he gets involved in the story. He writes a letter to Chizkiyahu. What does he write to Chizkiyahu? Shalom lamacha Chizkiyahu. Greetings to King Chizkiyahu. Shalom lekarta Yerushalayim. Greetings to the city of Jerusalem. Shalom lekal Rabba. Greetings to the great God. Right. So he writes first to greet Chizkiyahu. Second, he greets the city of Jerusalem. And third, he's acknowledging Hashem. Let's see Rashi. Rashi says, Okay, according to the Mefarshim, it seems like what happened basically was just a quick part of the story. Chizkiyahu gets sick, and Yeshayahu comes and says, the prophet comes and says, "You're a dead man, you're dying," and he davens, and God, he says, I think it's Gemara in Bracha says, I have a tradition for my family, for my fathers. But there's no such thing as even if the sword is on your neck, you still kadaven. There's nothing you there's never a situation you can't turn around. Even the most negative situation can be turned around. So he prays to God, and God comes, and the prophet comes back and says, "Okay, God, listen to your prayer. You're going to live." So he says, "I want a simon. I want a sign." He demanded a sign. So he said that you're going to have extra hours, but he didn't want, that wasn't enough. He wanted the sun to go backwards. He wanted to see it literally the miracle. He forced the miracle to be mamish, to change course of nature, and because of that, it affected the, so to say, the morning of this king. It says over here that he would that this king would go to sleep. What happened? He would go to sleep. Oh, here it says that near Marach B'shat Shis, he woke up on the ninth hour. The king, he slept in. He would always wake up in the ninth hour. He woke up in the ninth hour expecting it to be right before mid-afternoon, in the evening, right? 2/3 of the day he slept in. And that's what he did every day. And all of a sudden he wakes up and they're like, "Yeah, it's only 6 in. You know, he says, "What's going on?" So they told him that King Hezekiah got sick and got better, so God put the sun backwards. So Rashi says, the day that Hezekiah became better, instead of being a day of 12 hours, he added another 10 hours, it was a day of 22 hours of daylight. So literally, it seems like from Rashi that it wasn't like there was only 2 hours later of night, that there was actually a day of 24 hours, 22 hours plus an additional 12. So it was a day of 34 hours basically, as opposed to 24 hours. And Nebuchadnezzar, okay, so he sends a message to Chizkiah because he sees such a miracle. Praise the king, praise the city, praise the God. So Nebuchadnezzar suffered the Baladan Haver. So now we know possibly the connection. So he was always, it seems like Nebuchadnezzar was always a Babylonian. Some way or another, he ended up joining, like I said, it seems like the kingdoms of Babylonia and Assyria, which are next to each other, kind of mixed families. So at one point, he ended up being part of the war against Chizkiah himself. But this is before he's fighting Chizkiah. So he says, Nebuchadnezzar suffered the Baladan Haver. He was the scribe. He was one who would usually write these letters. But he wasn't there to write the letter that the king wanted. He would have corrected him automatically. And so he comes back as the scribe. He says, Kasvisu, how did you write the letter to Chizkiyahu, to the king? He said, they told him, this is what he wrote: praise the king, praise the city, praise the Lord. So he says back to them, because if you call him the great Lord and you put him last, you put him at the end of the letter. How should we write? He says, Shalom lelikai Rabba. First, you should write greetings to the great God. Shalom makarti d'Shalayim. He doesn't put Chizkiyahu before Jerusalem. He remains, Jerusalem is the great city first, and the third, Shagam Shalom L'Malach Chizkiyahu, third is to greetings to the great king Chizkiyahu. It's a famous idea. Moshe Rabbeinu said this to Pinchas, right? If you're the one who's the carrier of the letter, you go find the messenger and change the letter, right? You're making the point. You're criticizing our writing of the letter. You go fix it. So what happened? Rahat Basrei, he pursued the letter carrier, right? Those days they would have speed letter carriers. When he took 4 paces to find this letter carrier, is Asa Gavriel Vakmei. Gavriel stopped him. The angel Gavriel wouldn't let him take more than 4 paces. Rabbi Yochanan said, had Gavriel not stopped him after 4 paces, this is a play on words. The enemies of the Jews, meaning the Jewish people, would never survive Nebuchadnezzar, because every step he would have had another generation of kingdom. So Gavriel knew that for every step he was going to take for God, because he was coming to change the letter in God's praise, that God's name should be mentioned before the name of the city and before the name of the king. And because he took after 4 steps, Gabriel said, "No more, you're not walking anymore, because every step you take is going to end up prolonging your being a tyrant to the Jewish people." Again, this is all deeper for us than we could understand. We're talking about, here's a person who recognizes he knows how to write a letter to God, but at the same time he destroys his temple, right? The contradictions over here, like we're going to learn in a second, or maybe next week still. The Nebuzaradan, who destroys the temple, converts to Judaism. So it's not, we're talking about very spiritually inclined people with, at the same time, doesn't stop them from doing wicked things. So Rashi says, he chased the messenger, that had he took more than 4 paces, he would have such reward for taking steps for God. You have to remember something. He's taking steps for God, and the Jewish people are not really acting godly, right? So, like it says, I won't finish that thought. So either way, if he were to take more than 4 steps, then he would have destroyed all the remains of the Jewish people. Okay, let's just go a little further. Now the Gemara just wants to know about the name of Baladan ben Baladan. Why is his name Baladan, the son of Baladan? Okay, we're going to have, again, Steinsaltz, those who are following along on the screen, there's going to be missing a few lines that we're going to have to do from the inside of the text. For some reason, they keep missing the ends of the pages. My Baladan ben Baladan. What does it mean, Baladan, the son of Baladan? Amrei Baladan Malkihava. So what happened was, Baladan was his father, and he was the king before his son. Ishtani ape v'haved ki de kalva. For some reason, doesn't say why, his face turned into the face of a dog, and they dethroned him. He couldn't remain as king looking like that. So he set his son to be the king, but he was still alive. And the son, actually, this person you see, again, a sensitive person, he's sensitive to Hezekiah's becoming well. Okay, he's a young, spoiled boy. He sleeps 9 hours into the day, but still, he's sensitive to his father's covet, his father's, he respects his father. So he took his father's name, even though it was his father's name. So whenever we mention the king, his father should be mentioned with him. He wanted to do something special for his father. He would add his father in as his father was the king. And we're going to see in a second that there's a son who respects his father and a servant who respects his master. And Rashi doesn't explain what does it mean. It says in order for his father to have respect, he named himself Baladan. In Merodach-Baladan, he added his father's name to his own name. The Merodach ben Baladan layav miskari alei shmei davua. Had he just said that my name is Merodach, the son of Baladan, that's what everyone does. Everyone is identifies themselves by their father. He wanted to do something even extra for his father, so he included his father's name in his own name, and then he also added his father's name at the end, that he's also the son of his father. That's what everyone does. Pliny ben Pliny, so is the son of the name of the son of such a son. Then he added the name into his own name to do extra covet for his father. Okay. Again, so this is where you're missing the pages. I'm just going to continue. So the Gemara asks, Malka hainu dechsiv ben Chabed Av. Eved Adoinav ben Chabed Av Hadam. And what does it mean that a son who respects a father? That's the case of Baladach-Baladan, that he added his father's name to his own name, not just that he's the son. The Eved Adoinav. And what is the mean that there's a servant that respects his master? In the 5th month, in the 10th of the month, Hishnas Shah Esrei the Melech Nebuchadnezzar, that on the 5th month, on the 10th of the month, in the 19th month of the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar, Melech Bavel, the king of Bavel. Again, later, the same scribe who's Nebuchadnezzar doesn't say how he ends up becoming king, but he ends up becoming the king. He's obviously a minister, but I don't believe he was a descendant. Maybe he was. He ends up becoming the king of Babylonia. Nebuzaradan, again, we learned Nebuzaradan survived also. He was also in the battle of Sancheriv. Rav Tavachim, he is the master of the butchery, meaning to say he butchered a lot of people. That on the 5th month, which is the month of Av, on the 10th of the month, Tisha B'Av, on the 9th of the month, or at the end of the 10th of the month, on the 19th of the year of his kingdom, Nebuzaradan came and burnt Jerusalem, burnt the temple. Vespeis HaMelech, and he burns the house of the king, meaning the house of the kings of Judah. So what's this? What's the respect that he did for Nebuchadnezzar? So the Gemara asks, "Umisalek Nebuchadnezzar l'shleim, was he there? Because it said he mentioned him, but he wasn't there. Nebuchadnezzar that after Nebuzaradan conquered Jerusalem, he took Tzidkiyahu to Rivlasa, which is in Athens or somewhere in Greek area. So Nebuchadnezzar wasn't in Jerusalem when they destroyed the temple. Antiochia, I believe, is somewhere in Turkey, Greece. So what happened? So he wasn't there when he destroyed the temple. So why does he mention that he destroyed the temple? So he's showing the respect that the servant has for his master. He had such fear of the king that he carved out an image of the king, or it was carved out for him, depending on how you look at it, that he should always remember who's king. He's the great general and he's destroying Jerusalem, but he had the image of Nebuchadnezzar on his chariot, so he never forgot who his king was. The Gemara in Shabbos says how Nebuchadnezzar treated his generals, and it wasn't kind. And another opinion was, he had such fear of Nebuchadnezzar that even just the thought of him, even though he was all the way in Turkey or in Greece, he feared him as if he was standing right in front of him. Just to show you what the power of a tyrant is. So the Rashi just says, we're going to go a little further, and we're going to stop here. Misalik v'achsiv bahu parshta v'yalu tzidkiyahu al-melech Ravalta Alma Biravla Hava, that Nebuchadnezzar wasn't in Jerusalem when he destroyed Jerusalem. He was in Ravla, which is Antiochia, which is in Turkey. Zu Antiochia Kamilon the Enim Eretz Yisrael. Antiochia is not part of Israel, Eretz Yisrael. Again, if on the map, I think it's still named till today. You could Google it. I think it's still there, and I think it's somewhere in mid-Turkey. The Musti Nebuchadnezzar, he had an image of Nebuchadnezzar carved in his chariot to give him, to never forget who's the boss. Nebuzaradan had the image of Nebuchadnezzar carved into his chariot. He always felt like he was standing watching him. And therefore he says he gave credit to Nebuchadnezzar, he gave respect to Nebuchadnezzar in order to destroy, to show his respect. Okay, we're going to stop over here. And
Rabbi?
Yeah, go ahead,
This
Barbara.
is Barbara. I just wanted to correct something. It was Jael. Yael, the
Yeah,
lion
you're right.
McKinnon.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember. You're right. It's Yoel. It was Yoel who killed Sisro.
Yeah.
She gave him some milk and beheaded him. Yes, you're right. Correct.
I
Thank
was
you.
thinking of the painting, and I think the painting says Judith is what got me confused. So
Oh.
I had to check that. All right. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. So we're going to stop here. The next piece of the Gemara is going to be about the actual destruction of the temple that was done by Nebuzaradan and Nebuchadnezzar. And of course, and then the story, the famous, well-known story of Zechariah Navi, Zechariah the prophet whose blood is boiling for many years, and what Nebuzaradan does to try to calm down the blood of Zechariah, and how that actually leads to his conversion to Judaism. Yes, Aaron?
This is a good question. What years is this happening?
What years did this happen? It has to be about 500 BC, something like that. 500 something BC. Because the destruction of the temple was about 70 years between the two temples, and the second temple stood 490 years. So, and I think they start counting the calendar was the destruction of the second temple, I think, is the year 70. That's about 500 years. Again, if you go online, these kings lived a lot earlier than the story seems to play out. Like this Baladan lived, I think, 800 before BC. I have to check again. I looked yesterday. I don't know. I have to figure out how it works with the modern, with the history, with the Gemaras. I mean, these are, we know Nebuzaradan is the destroyer, Nebuchadnezzar is the destroyer. We have all the biblical text on that, but it just seems that he lived very long because he's the scribe in the times of Hezekiah, in the times of Achaz. Achaz is in that even earlier, right? I mean, we're talking about a long time. I think Hezekiah until the destruction is close to 100 years. I have to check again. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining, and we'll continue this Mirza Hashem next week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.